This is the story of Saul, the first king of Israel in the book of 1 Samuel. He was chosen, anointed, lifted before a nation, and given the kind of beginning many people would have called a blessing. Yet by the end of his life, Saul had lost his peace, his profit, his family's future, his throne, and finally himself on Mount Gilboa. So the question is simple, but deeply troubling. How can a man be chosen by God, crowned before a people, victorious in battle, and still end his life hearing only silence? Before Saul died on Mount Gilboa, before his sons fell beside him, before Israel's first crown was dragged into the dust of defeat, there was a night when the king walked through darkness in disguise. No trumpet announced him, no guards marched beside him, no priest carried incense before his steps. The man who had once stood taller than all Israel now moved beneath another identity, as if even his own name had become too heavy to wear. Tomorrow, the Philistines would come. They were one of Israel's great enemies in this period, a military power that haunted the early story of the monarchy. Their army waited across the hills. Their fires burned beneath the night sky. Saul had seen them, and something inside him had trembled. This was not merely the fear of a soldier before battle. It was the terror of a man who felt that everything he had avoided and delayed had finally arrived. So he searched for an answer. The biblical story says Saul inquired of the Lord, but no dream came, no prophet spoke, no sacred sign answered him. Around him there was the movement of war, the fear of his men, and the weight of mourning. Above him, there was silence, and that silence had memory. It carried Samuel's warnings. Samuel being the prophet who had once anointed Saul and spoken God's word to him. It carried the sound of a robe tearing in Saul's hand. It carried the songs he could not bear to hear, the spear he had thrown, and the future he could not stop. Saul does not fall because nothing sacred ever touched his life. He falls while carrying the memory of sacred things. Oil had touched his head. A prophet had spoken into his life. A crown had been placed before him, yet slowly, almost invisibly, fear began to rule the man who had been called to rule. A crown can reveal what it cannot heal. To understand Saul's last night, we have to go backward, back before Endor, back before the spear, back before David's name was sung in the streets, back before the torn robe in Samuel's hand, back to a man searching for lost donkeys, unaware that he himself was about to be found. The night before, Gilboa was more than the eve of a battle. It was the final shape of Saul's unraveling. By this point in the story, he was still called king, still surrounded by the remains of authority, still standing at the head of Israel's army. But inside him, something had already collapsed. The Philistines had gathered for war, and their presence carried the weight of old fear. Israel had wanted a king, partly because the people longed for someone visible, someone who could stand at the front and gather scattered tribes into one body. A king was supposed to face danger before the people did. He was supposed to give fear a shape it could follow. But when Saul looked across the battlefield, fear did not leave Israel through him. It entered him. The text gives the moment with terrible restraint. Saul saw the Philistine army, and he was afraid. His heart trembled greatly. Beneath that simple sentence is the sound of a man breaking inward. So Saul sought the Lord. Once there had been Samuel, the prophet and judge who stood at the threshold of Israel's old world and its new monarchy. Samuel had anointed Saul, warned him, confronted him, and grieved over him. He had been more than an advisor. He was the living reminder that Saul's crown was never merely political. But Samuel was dead. And when Saul asked for guidance, nothing came. No dream, no prophet, no sacred answer. The king stood at the edge of the future, and heaven seemed closed. There are silences that feel holy, like the hush before dawn, or the stillness after thunder has rolled away from a mountain. But this silence was not gentle. It was heavy with all the words Saul had heard before and failed to keep. It was the silence after warning, after departure, after too many moments when truth had come near and Saul had tried to survive it without surrendering to it. In that silence, Saul crossed a line he himself had once enforced. The biblical story says he had removed those who consulted the dead from the land. He had acted, outwardly at least, like a king guarding Israel from forbidden practices. But now he asked his servants to find him such a woman. There was one at Endor. So Saul disguised himself and went by night. The image is devastating because everything in it is reversed. The king who had once been publicly revealed now hides. The ruler who had banished forbidden voices now seeks one. The man who once heard Samuel in life now searches for Samuel among the dead. This is not curiosity. It is desperation. Saul does not go into the night because he wants mystery. He goes because the silence has become unbearable. He wants one more word, one final voice, one last direction before morning breaks. But Saul seeks Samuel too late. He does not go because his heart has finally become free. He goes because he cannot control what is coming. He wants guidance at the end of a road built from years of resisting guidance when it still came in time. When the message reaches him, it gives no escape. The kingdom has been torn away. The battle will end in defeat. Saul and his sons will fall. The voice he sought does not rescue him from the night. It confirms that the night has already become his sentence. That is where the story begins, not with the crown shining, but with the crown unable to save him. A king in disguise, a dead prophet, a forbidden house, a battlefield waiting for morning. Long before Saul walked toward Endor, Israel was standing at the edge of a different kind of darkness. The people wanted a king. For anyone new to this part of the Bible, this moment matters because Israel had not always lived under a monarchy. The people had tribes, elders, judges, and prophets. But now they wanted a visible ruler like the nations around them. Their request was not only political, it was emotional. They wanted someone who could gather them, judge them, lead them into battle, and stand before other nations with the shape of power. They wanted a human answer to fear. Samuel warned them that a king would not only protect, a king would also take sons, daughters, fields, vineyards, labor, loyalty. A crown could gather a people, but it could also burden them. It could stand between them and danger, but it could also stand over them. Still, they asked, and into that longing came Saul, son of Kish, from the tribe of Benjamin. He did not enter the story like a man reaching for greatness. He entered searching for lost donkeys. It is a quiet beginning, almost ordinary, and that ordinariness matters. Saul was not introduced as a schemer hungry for a throne. He was a man pulled into destiny while walking through the concerns of daily life. Then Samuel saw him. The meeting carried the stillness of something hidden becoming visible. Samuel took oil and poured it on Saul's head. Before the crowd ever shouted, before Israel saw height and strength, Saul was marked in private. For Saul, that moment was not loud. It was oil, a prophet, and the strange burden of being chosen. But when the private calling became public, the story turned unsettling. The tribes gathered, the lot was cast, Saul was named. The man chosen to stand before Israel should have stepped forward. Instead, he was missing. They searched for him and found him hidden among the baggage. No image reveals Saul more quietly than this one. The future king is not on a platform, not lifting his hands, not claiming destiny. He is among the bundles and packed things, close to the ordinary objects people carry from place to place. Then they brought him out. When he stood among the people, he was taller than all of them. His body seemed to answer Israel's desire. Here was a king they could see, a man of height, a man of presence, someone whose very appearance could calm a frightened nation. The people shouted for him, and in that moment, Saul seemed to become the answer Israel had been seeking. But the image of the baggage remained like a shadow at the edge of his story. Saul was chosen for visibility, but something in him feared exposure. He had the form of strength, but not yet the inner rest that can endure being watched, questioned, and obeyed. Still, Saul was not merely weak. This is important because his story becomes too simple if we turn him into a failure from the beginning. When Jabesh-Gilead was threatened by Nahash the Ammonite, Saul rose with startling force. The city faced humiliation and danger, and Saul did not hide. The story says the Spirit of God came upon him, and his anger burned. This time, the man who had hidden among the baggage became the king the people needed. He gathered Israel, led them against the Ammonites, and rescued Jabesh-Gilead. A city that might have been shamed and broken was delivered. After that victory, the people renewed his kingship at Gilgal with great rejoicing. Saul had not only been chosen, he had proven useful. He had stood between his people and a real enemy. For a brief moment, the story shines. The oil, the crown, the height, the victory, the shouting of the people, all of it seems to come together. Yet triumph can cover what it has not cured. The question raised among the baggage did not disappear. Could Saul stand when the people were not cheering? Could he obey when obedience made him look powerless? Could he trust when delay felt like danger? A crown can be placed on a man in a single day, but the weight of it is revealed slowly. Gilgal became the place where pressure found the crack. The Philistines gathered against Israel, and the people trembled. Men hid in caves, in pits, among rocks, in tombs and cisterns. The ground itself seemed to swallow the courage of the nation. Israel had asked for a king, but even with a king, fear was spreading. Saul waited for Samuel. There was an order to be honored. Samuel was to come, The sacrifice was to be offered. The moment required more than strategy. It required obedience. Saul was not only a commander managing a crisis, he was a king whose authority still stood beneath a sacred word. But the days passed, and the people began to scatter. Every departing soldier made Saul's position feel weaker. Every hour made waiting feel more dangerous. He could see morale dissolving in front of him. He could feel the enemy pressing near. In that pressure, obedience began to look like inaction, and inaction began to look like failure. So Saul acted. He offered the burnt offering himself to the men around him. Perhaps it looked decisive. Perhaps it looked like the king taking control when the prophet had not arrived. But within the story, the act becomes the first deep fracture. Saul chooses visible action over patient trust. He crosses a line because he cannot bear the fear of losing the people. Then Samuel arrives, almost immediately. That is the painful edge of the scene. Saul cannot wait. And the moment he stops waiting, the one he waited for appears. The sacrifice has barely ended when Samuel stands before him and asks what he has done. Saul explains. The people were scattering. Samuel had not arrived. The Philistines were gathering. Saul felt forced. The reasons are human, and that is why the scene carries weight. Saul is not acting from calm defiance. He is acting from pressure, fear, and the desperate need to prevent collapse. But Samuel's answer cuts through every explanation. Saul has acted foolishly. His kingdom will not continue as it might have. Another kind of king is already being sought. The crown remains on Saul's head, but something invisible has been wounded. Then comes Amalek. This scene is harder, older, and darker. The biblical command against Amalek belongs to a severe ancient world, and it should not be treated lightly or casually, but inside the narrative of Saul's life. The focus is clear. Saul receives a command and does not carry it through as given. He defeats Amalek, but he spares Agag the king. He keeps the best of the sheep and cattle. What appears worthless is destroyed. What appears valuable is preserved. When Samuel comes, Saul greets him as if all is well. He says he has performed the command, but the animals are still making noise. That sound matters. It is the truth interrupting Saul's version of the truth. The king speaks the language of obedience, while the evidence of his compromise stands behind him, alive and audible. Samuel asks about the sheep and cattle. Saul shifts. The people spared the best, he says, to sacrifice to the Lord. Suddenly, what was kept becomes religious. What was preserved becomes an offering. What was incomplete is dressed as devotion. Samuel refuses the disguise. To listen is better than sacrifice. Obedience matters more than the performance of worship. The issue is not that Saul lacks religious words. The issue is that religious words have become a covering for a heart ruled by fear. Then Saul admits what has been hiding underneath. He feared the people and listened to their voice. The sentence opens the center of him. Saul, the king Israel asked for, is afraid of Israel. The man chosen to lead the people cannot bear to stand apart from them. Even after this confession, he asks Samuel to honor him before the elders and before Israel. The wound is visible now. Saul is not only afraid of disobedience, he is afraid of public shame. He can face armies, but he cannot bear the collapse of his image before the people. Samuel turns to leave. Saul reaches out and catches his robe. The fabric tears. It is a small action, but it becomes the symbol of everything. Saul tries to hold on to the prophet, to the moment, to the honor slipping away from him. But what remains in his hand is not restoration. It is torn cloth. Samuel says the kingdom has been torn from him. The crown does not fall at once. That is the cruelty of the story. Saul must go on wearing what has already been taken in judgment. He must continue ruling while knowing that the future has moved beyond him. From this point on, Saul is not simply king. He is a man holding on to a kingdom that has begun to leave his hands. David first entered Saul's world as relief. The biblical story says Saul was tormented by a troubling spirit, language that belongs to the ancient world of the text and should be handled with care. What the story makes clear is that Saul's inner life had become unstable, and David, a young man from Bethlehem, was brought with a lyre. He did not come first as a rival. He came as a musician. His hands moved across the strings, and for a time, the darkness inside Saul loosened. That is one of the story's quiet mercies. The man who would one day carry the future of the kingdom first came near Saul as comfort. But some gifts reveal what we can no longer keep. Then came Goliath. David stepped into the valley while armies watched from the hills. He faced the Philistine champion and brought him down. For Israel, it was deliverance. For the people, it was wonder. For Saul, it began as victory too, because Israel's enemy had fallen. But celebration can become dangerous when it names the future before the present is ready to hear it. When David returned, the women sang. Their words lifted Saul, but they lifted David higher. Saul had slain thousands, they said, and David tens of thousands. It was only a song. No rebellion had begun. No throne had been seized. No army had declared for David against Saul. Yet in that moment, Saul heard more than praise. He heard comparison. He heard displacement. He heard the future turning its face towards someone else. The text says Saul eyed David from that day forward. That gaze changes the story. David does not need to attack Saul for Saul to feel threatened. He only needs to be loved. He only needs to succeed. He only needs to stand in the light of favor that Saul can no longer rest in. Soon the palace becomes a battlefield of the mind. David plays the lyre as before. Saul sits with a spear in his hand. The music that once brought relief now comes from the person Saul fears most. Peace arrives through the one he believes will replace him, and Saul cannot bear it. The spear flies. In that single movement, royal power becomes panic. Saul tries to pin David to the wall, as if the future can be stopped by force, as if a prophecy can be silenced by a weapon. David escapes, and Saul becomes afraid of him. From here, Saul's fear widens. He gives David dangerous tasks and watches him survive them. He sees David succeed in battle. He sees the people love him. He sees something around David that he cannot command, purchase, or kill. Every blessing around David becomes to Saul. Another accusation. Even Saul's own household begins to move toward David. Jonathan, Saul's son, loves David. The prince who might have carried Saul's line forward binds himself to the man whose rise means Saul's house will not continue as Saul imagined. Jonathan gives David his robe, his armor, his sword, his bow, and his belt. Another robe enters the story. Samuel's torn robe had shown Saul what was being taken. Jonathan's robe now moves toward David freely, in love and loyalty. Saul's future is not only being judged from above, it is being recognized from within his own family. Saul can see the transfer happening, but he cannot bless it. He can recognize David's innocence at moments, but he cannot release his fear. He can weep, confess, and speak tenderly. But the old terror returns. Remorse comes to Saul, but surrender does not. So the king becomes a hunter. He pursues the man who had fought Israel's enemy. He turns royal attention away from the Philistines and toward David. The protector of Israel becomes consumed with protecting himself from the future God has allowed to rise. The darkness spreads outward. At Nob, the priests are drawn into Saul's suspicion. David had received help there in his flight, bread, a weapon, provisions given in a moment of need. Saul hears of it and sees treason. Fear has trained him to treat kindness as conspiracy. He summons the priests and accuses them. His own servants refuse to strike them, unwilling to raise their hands against those who serve the Lord. But Doeg the Edomite does what they will not. Blood enters the sacred place. The violence at Nob is one of the clearest signs that Saul's inner collapse has become public disaster. A king who once rescued Jabesh Gilead now destroys Nob. And still, David escapes. By the time Samuel dies, Saul has lost more than a prophet. David is beyond his grasp. Jonathan's heart is bound to David. Nob is stained with blood. The Philistines remain. And Saul, who once could not wait at Gilgal, is now entering the final silence where no answer will come at all. So the story returns to the night. The Philistines gather. Israel is afraid. Saul sees the army and feels his heart tremble. He seeks the Lord, but there is no answer through dreams, prophets, or sacred means. Only the silence remains. This time, he does not wait. He does not fall before God in surrender. He does not gather the people in repentance. He asks for someone who can consult the dead. His servants tell him of the woman at Endor, and Saul goes by night. The reversal is complete. The man once hidden among baggage now hides beneath a disguise. The man once brought into the open as king now moves in secrecy. The man who once received Samuel's living rebuke now tries to call that voice out of death. The woman is afraid. Saul himself had driven people like her from the land. She suspects danger, and rightly so. But Saul swears she will not be punished. Even this promise carries irony. The king who cannot secure his own life now promises safety to another. The scene unfolds in dread. The biblical text does not explain every mystery for us. It does not turn the moment into an argument about the unseen world. It simply tells the story with terrible seriousness. Saul believes he is hearing Samuel, and he bows with his face to the ground. The voice does not comfort him. Saul says he is greatly distressed. The Philistines are at war with him. God has turned away and no longer answers. He does not know what to do. He does not know what to do. For years, he had acted quickly. He had offered what he should have waited to offer. He had kept what he should not have kept. He had protected the appearance of honor. He had thrown the spear, hunted David, and accused priests. Now, at the edge of the last battle, he is empty of direction. But the answer he receives is not guidance. It is finality. The kingdom has been torn away. David is named as the one to whom it moves. Israel will fall before the Philistines. Saul and his sons will die. Tomorrow, Saul collapses to the ground, drained of strength. He has eaten nothing. The woman urges him to take food. His servants urge him too. The moment is strange and deeply human. A doomed king receiving a final meal in the dark before the morning of his death. Then comes Gilboa. The battle is told with brutal simplicity. The Philistines fight. Israel flees. Men fall on the mountain. Saul's sons are struck down, including Jonathan. Jonathan's death darkens everything. He was the son who loved David, the prince who might have inherited Saul's throne, yet whose heart had recognized the future Saul fought against. When Jonathan falls, Saul's house does not merely suffer defeat, its future falls with him. Then the archers find Saul, the first king of Israel, once taller than all the people, is wounded and unable to escape. He asks his armor-bearer to kill him, fearing what the Philistines will do if they take him alive. The armor-bearer is too afraid. So Saul takes his own sword and falls on it. The story that began with lost donkeys and hidden oil now ends on a mountain with blood on the ground. No crowd shouts for him. No prophet blesses him. No music soothes him. The crown's first chapter closes in violence, defeat, and silence. The Philistines find the bodies. They strip Saul. They cut off his head. They fasten his body and the bodies of his sons to the wall of Beth-shan. The humiliation is public and ancient. The body of a king turned into a trophy. But even here, the story does not end in mockery, far away. The men of Jabesh Gilead hear what has happened. They remember years before, at the bright beginning of Saul's reign. He had saved their city from shame and violence. When they were threatened, he came. That memory survives the ruin. So they rise in the night. They travel to Beth-shan. They take down the bodies of Saul and his sons. They carry them back, burn them, bury the bones, and fast. It is one of the most mournful circles in the story. The king who walked into the night in desperation is carried through the night in mercy. The city he once saved becomes the final witness that Saul was not only his failure. Saul remains a warning, but a warning wrapped in grief. He was chosen, and still he lost everything, not because the choosing was false, but because calling does not remove the hidden fractures of the heart. A crown does not heal fear. Public honor does not create trust. Victory does not guarantee obedience. Saul could stand above the people. but he could not stop fearing them. He could lead armies, but he could not wait when waiting felt like weakness. He could recognize David's righteousness, but he could not stop hunting him. He could seek Samuel in death, but he had resisted Samuel in life. And so the first king of Israel becomes a haunted mirror, a man marked by oil, yet ruled by fear, a man given a kingdom, yet unable to stop grasping at it, a man who began among the baggage and ended on a mountain, a man who once heard the call of God, and in the end heard only silence. When the smoke clears from Saul's story, what remains is not a clean lesson or a simple verdict. It is something heavier, more sorrowful, and more human. Saul was not a stranger to sacred things. He was not untouched by destiny. He was not a man with no courage, no victories, no moments of real strength. He had all of these, and that is why his fall still troubles the heart. His story asks us to sit with a difficult truth. Being chosen is not the same as being whole. A calling can open a door, but it does not force the soul to walk through it in trust. A crown can lift a man above others, but it cannot quiet the fear that lives inside him. Saul moved from oil to ashes, from public shouting to private dread, from prophetic voice to unanswered silence. Yet even at the end, when his body had been dishonored and his house lay broken, men from Jabesh Gilead walked through the night to bring him home. The ruin was not denied, but neither was the memory of the man he had once been. That is why Saul cannot be dismissed too easily. He is not only a villain and not only a victim. He remains what the story leaves before us: chosen, crowned, afraid, warned, unraveling, and finally fallen. A king who had everything placed before him and still lost everything, not in one moment, but one fear at a time.